Hi, my name is Bunny Cakes and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher. I originally picked this up because everybody was talking about it because Netflix just came out with a series based on this book. And I like to read the books that things are based on before I watch movies or TV shows based on books. So that I can have my own unique experience that way and then experience the TV show or movie or whatever. Um, this book discusses some heavy topics, uh, primarily suicide, and but it also discusses things like rape. And I think that the way this book was done was kind of amazing because you get not only the suicidal person's perspective, but you get the perspective of somebody who had a relationship with that person and lived afterwards. And so you get a peek into the sort of senseless, hopeless, chaoticness of a person who is so desperate that they commit suicide, and you can see the grief and despair and aftermath of somebody who cared for that person. I think that is what made me like this book so much more than if I had just read um, Hannah's half of the story. I think that there are some parts that seem very shallow, and there are parts that kind of don't make a whole lot of sense. But I also think that that's kind of the point of it, because sure, something might seem shallow to you, but you have no idea how deeply it might affect somebody else, depending on what they're going through. You know, there are things that happen to Hannah that if she had been in a different mindset, she probably would have brushed it off. A lot of us have brushed those things off, and I think that that makes it easy for people to forget that things affect everyone differently. Um, I also liked that the main character Clay, he goes through so many different stages. He's shocked and he's angry and he's in denial and he's upset and he loves and he hates and he's lost. And I think that's a good thing to show too, the grief of what happens after. I know a lot of people have said that they feel like this book glorifies suicide, and then there are people who say it doesn't. I fall on the side of the people who say it doesn't, but I do understand how somebody who's reading it could think that it does glorify suicide, because suicide is so difficult to talk about, and I think that's one of the reasons that the author wrote this book, to start a conversation, not to glorify the issue or the things that cause it, but to get us talking about it. Because suicide and attempted suicide and just thoughts of suicide are so hard to talk about, because there is so much victim blaming. So many times in this book, um, Hannah feels like she has been screaming from the rooftops that she needs help and she just wants somebody to hear her. But then Clay, when he's reacting to this, he says, "No, you didn't. You didn't make it clear to me. Nobody knew. Nobody could see it. And you chose this." And I think that it's poignant to see both sides of that. She thought she was, but everybody else thought she wasn't, screaming from the rooftops that this was happening. And only upon looking back on it could Clay and probably the other people around her see that there were signs, and she tried, just maybe not as hard as some people thought she needed to. And it's difficult. If you've ever been depressed or had thoughts of suicide, or even just been in any type of despair, to feel like you're screaming it, but nobody hears you. And sometimes it's because nobody does hear you, because they're not listening. And not because they're intentionally not listening, but just because they're not listening. Um, and I think it's important I think this is an important book to read. And I hope that the TV show stands up to the book. And I hope that this book starts a discussion more so than it did before. Now that there's a TV show about it, now that people are talking about it again, I hope that a discussion starts, and this may even help to eliminate some of the stigma around depression and thoughts of suicide. I think one of the main reasons people don't talk about their thoughts of suicide is because they don't talk about their depression. And people don't talk about their depression because it's seen as bad or weak. So many times you see people who have committed suicide. I'm thinking of, like, Robin Williams last year committed suicide, and so people are so quick to go, well, that's so weak. And that's not what it is. And it's not selfish, even though if you don't look deeply it can appear selfish. I think most of the time when people commit suicide, it's not that they necessarily want to die, it's just they want the pain to end, and that's the only option that they can find. And it sucks and it's sad, and I hope that if you feel that way, that you can find the courage to ask for help and understand that sometimes you can't beat around the bush about it. You literally have to take a club and beat somebody over the head with it to make them understand how bad you're feeling. But on top of that, not to put all the responsibility on somebody who's feeling that way, for the people who aren't feeling that way, we also need to take responsibility and pay attention to the people in our lives and pay attention to changes. You know, does somebody you know suddenly seem really quiet and distant? Do they seem off? You know, are things changing? Are they slipping away? Are they stepping back from things that they used to participate in? And ask why. And don't beat them over the head with it. And don't even necessarily come at them and say, you know, I think that you might be depressed or whatever. But ask them if they need a friend, if they need an ear to hear what they're saying, a shoulder to cry on, or just somebody to hang out with for 15 minutes, just so they don't feel alone. Make an effort to be present in people's lives, because you never know what they're going through. And you don't want to end up like Clay and not only miss your chance, but also suffer through the guilt and regret of, if I had just said that one thing, if I had just taken that chance, would I have been able to prevent it? Would I have been able to save a life? And so I hope everybody reads this book, or at least watches the TV show. Whether you think that this book glorifies suicide or it doesn't, talk about it. That's what's important. Talk about it. Talk about the book. Talk about suicide. Talk about depression. Talk about mental illness and discuss. Post down below if you have, if you disagree with my opinion on the book, or if you agree with it, or if you have experience with depression or suicidal thoughts or anything like that. Please feel free to post below or even message me privately. I would love to discuss those things with you. Also linked below, I will try to find some suicide hotlines and crisis hotlines and websites that you can go to if you feel depressed or suicidal, or if you know somebody who is. Um, so thank you for joining me for this. Please join the discussion and keep reading.